Welcome, everyone, to a conversation with healers. And this is Jakara, and I am bringing today an amazing, beautiful soul that I met at one of the ceremonies that I attended earlier, actually last year. We're already on 2023. And, I am bringing in people that I consider healers, and they can be people who are doing things such as spiritual healing, like what I do, but I'm also trying to bring people into this space that are doing healing in different aspects. And it's not a surprise that we are spiritual, emotional, and physical beings. And today I have a beautiful soul that focuses on trying to bring the spiritual and the physical together in healing. So before I introduce her, I just kind of wanted to put out there, what is the definition of a healer? Because you may not really see it as something that you can do yourself. You may see me or the person that I'm going to introduce you today to as a healer, but I want to invite you to start seeing yourself as a healer. And a healer is a person, according to the dictionary online, Merriam-Webster, is the one who seeks healing or the one that heals. So if you are seeking healing, that means that you yourself are a healer. The difference is some of us are seeking healing for others and some of us are seeking healing for ourselves. So if you're seeking healing at this moment, you, your soul, are a healer. So with this conversation, I'm bringing in a holistic health coach, and her name is Tatiana. And I am so excited to bring her over. And I cannot express to you how much I adore this soul. She has a beautiful perspective on what physical healing is about. And the reason why I wanted to bring her today is specifically because of a post that she made on her Instagram about how we are now being bombarded into all of this weight loss programs and all of this stuff about, restricting ourselves. And her perspective is actually the opposite from what you see out there. And her perspective comes from a place of expansion, a place of love, a place of compassion, which is really where we want to start our healing journey whenever we're looking into healing our bodies. We want to start from that expansive perspective. So, welcome, Tatiana. Thank you so much for saying yes to participating on this conversation with me today. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me. When I saw your text message, I was like I didn't even have to think about it. I was like, yes, what do I have to do? Just tell me, like, I'm all in. No problem. This is gonna be great.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm so happy. And can you tell us a little bit about what you do as a holistic health practitioner?
I would say right now, my main job is working as a personal trainer, specifically in corrective exercise for women's health, pregnancy, and postpartum. That's a very big passion of mine. And then I also work as a nutrition coach as well as a transformative life coach. So you might hear those things and be like, well, she's all over the place. But honestly, at the center of all of that is really the same thing. It's really working with people in different capacities towards the same goal, which is healing. And I I love it. I love what I do. I'm very passionate about it. I get really excited when I talk about like carbohydrates or like, the oblique swing or stuff like that. But yeah.
That's beautiful. And I kind of wanted to get us started in your story and how you got started in this journey of becoming the person that you are today. So can you tell us a little bit about what ignited your process?
Okay. I'm gonna try to make it a little concise because there are a lot of like very pivotal moments in my life. I grew up in Chicago. I grew up I was raised by my father and my grandparents. He was a single parent, and I didn't have my mom in my life pretty much at all. Um, and I always just kind of felt like this outsider. I didn't really feel like I fit in with my father's family and the way they lived their lives. I think I was just kind of born with this understanding that there was something different out there that was more aligned with me. But at that age, you don't know that there's things outside of your little bubble that exist. And when I was 18 years old, I graduated high school, and then I just got on a plane and I moved to Israel by myself. I thought it was like made the most sense. I did not want to go to college. I had a few friends that were going there or had been there. And I was just like, I'm ready to get out of Dodge. So I moved to Israel. My family is Jewish. I'm Jewish. My mother is Israeli. And I immediately went into an ultra Orthodox seminary and I started learning about religion. And it was what my heart was looking for. And it filled this hole that I hadn't even realized was there. And for the first time in my life, I saw functional families and I saw um, loving mothers, and I saw a lot of things that I really wanted. And about a year after I got there, I met my husband. He was also an Orthodox Jew at the time, and we got married and like started our life in Israel with like our little Jewish family. Um, and about a year after we got married, my oldest son was born. Once he was born, life just kind of got a lot harder. Being a mom is really difficult. I was very young. I think I was 20 when I had him. And I didn't know how to take care of myself. I didn't have a concept of self-care. It was never modeled for me. It was never taught to me. And I ended up, he was about 4 months old, and I was like 100 pounds overweight at that point. And I was just tired all the time. And I didn't feel like I was living the way that I could or should be, because my weight was stopping me from, even just going to the local grocery store to get stuff for dinner. Like I didn't want to do anything, but I had this adorable little baby and I wanted better for him. And I literally just remember one day waking up and standing in front of the mirror and thinking to myself, you know, if I had started what I keep wanting to start 2 weeks ago, I would have been at least 2 weeks closer to like feeling good about myself. A lot of it was feeling good about myself. In my head, it was the weight. In my head, it was like, if I can get the weight off, I will be a better person. I will be prettier. I will be smarter. I will just be like more of everything. At that time, that's how I understood. What I realize now is just a desire for growth. And I literally just made that decision. Like, I'm just going to start now. Like, why not? And I really did. And I started researching about nutrition. I started going for walks. I borrowed an elliptical machine from my neighbors and I started working out little by little. And I really like taught myself from the ground up what a healthy lifestyle was at the time. And I lost a lot of weight and I felt amazing. And I had 3 more children over the course of a few years. And I was always very passionate about health and nutrition after that because I knew it transformed who I was as a person. It changed my personality, or if it didn't change my personality, it gave me the confidence to be the person that I always knew I was. Because I'd been overweight as a child and a teen. And I always just was so critical of myself. And all of a sudden, I didn't need to be critical of myself. And it also gave me the energy and stamina to be like a stay-at-home mom of four like really rambunctious kids. I mean, we were living in Israel. We didn't have a car. We didn't have, we lived on the third floor. I would like schlep up my kids upstairs and down. Like I was very physically active and I needed that energy and I needed to be like really nourishing to my body. I had a lot of friends that were on their fourth, fifth, sixth child. And the ones that weren't taking care of themselves were really seeing like a lot of physical health issues. And I didn't want that to be me. So I really became passionate about exercise and nutrition. I was a raw foodist for a while. I, did Krav Maga, I did boxing. I kind of dabbled in everything. And then about 10 years ago, my husband had a nervous breakdown and everything kind of changed after that. The entire dynamic of our lives became centered around him having like this mental health issue. It was eventually diagnosed as PTSD. And he was an addictions and crisis counselor by profession. And I always looking back think it's so interesting that he had so much knowledge of addiction and he had so much knowledge of suicide and suicidal ideation. But when it came to the mental health aspect, when he first had a nervous breakdown, like we just didn't know what was going on. There was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of kind of scrambling to figure out what needed to happen now. And eventually we decided to move to America so he could get the proper treatment. When we moved here and he went away, we knew he was going to be away for an extended period of time. We actually ended up separating at that time. And I was on my own in a new country. My kids were between the ages of 5 and 13. And they were very Israeli. And now they were in America, learning English for the first time and having to navigate a completely different culture. My husband was dealing with his PTSD very severely in inpatient treatment. And I decided at that time that, I needed a way to support my family. So I went back to school to become a personal trainer. Because that was something I kind of always had in the back of my head. But with my husband's mental health issues, I never pursued it because it just wasn't feasible. I was his full-time caretaker and I just I couldn't invest in that even emotionally. And I ended up finishing a course. It was a 600-hour personal training course, and I started working as a personal trainer. And I loved it, and I really love it to this day. When we were separated, it was a very difficult time. That first year or 2 years, being in this country, having children that were some acclimating better than others, and then having separated from my husband, it was a lot of emotional upheaval. And I think that was the first time in my life that I had to take a really deep look at how I needed to upgrade as a human being, and not just on a physical level, but now this transformation needed to happen on an emotional and energetic level. Because I saw my family falling apart. I saw my children in a lot of pain. I saw my husband in a lot of pain. And I kind of they say humans are not, we don't like change until things get so painful that the difficulty of change is easier than the pain of staying the same. And that was me. It was too difficult. It hurt too bad to stay the same. And I ended up going to my first ayahuasca retreat. My husband was actually the one that encouraged me to do it when we were separated. And I went, and it was just kind of it opened up a world that I knew existed, but I wasn't able to find before that. uh, if that kind of makes sense. Like when you
Yeah.
remember something that you had forgotten. But this world was very opened up to me, and I did a lot of healing over a period of a few months, with several different retreats, and really just kind of like sitting with myself and being like, I have to change. It's not him that's the problem. It's not being here. It's not this. It's not that. Like you know, the one thing that all of my problems had in common, that common denominator was me. And I had that realization at one point, and I was just like, whoa, okay. Like, where do I want to go with this? Am I going to just kind of brush it off? Or am I going to take this kind of profound realization and do something with it? Like, why am I here on earth? Like, what is the purpose of my life? Is it to run and hide from the things that are hard? Like, no, it's really to just dig deep into that, into like the like gooey, gross, difficult, painful, and try to make something beautiful out of it. So I worked really hard on myself, and I asked my husband to, reconcile with me. And I was very vulnerable at a time where, like, you do not want to be vulnerable with that other person. I had all the normal sort of feelings of like, it's all your fault. And, like, well, that's your stuff that you're projecting onto me. But I remember very clearly at an ayahuasca ceremony, seeing a couple that just showed up for each other on such a level that I don't think I had ever seen. Like, whoever that person was, their their partner was just 100% ready to accept them for whoever they were, wherever they were at that point, and just give unconditional love. And I had not seen that maybe ever. And I remember sitting in ceremony and saying, like, just praying to Mama Aya, as we say, like, I want that. Like, I want that relationship in my life. Like, I'm ready to show up for someone 100%. I want someone that'll show up for me 100%. And I heard Mama Aya in her little voice in my ear, and she said, honey, I gave that to you a long time ago, and you threw it away. But maybe you can have it back if you're really willing to do the work and understand the gift you have already been given. And I took that really seriously. And I worked really hard to put my marriage back together, to identify a lot of my triggers and a lot of my, dysfunctional coping mechanisms surrounding my relationships. And, um, you know, thank God we are doing well most days, not every day, like every marriage. But through all of this, I took a lot of these concepts, not just in my marriage, but also into my work. So as I was kind of working on this, and I feel like I kind of went on a tangent a little bit, but as I was working on all of these emotional healing aspects, I realized how much in sync it is with the physical form of healing, or getting healthy, or however you want to see it. Because once you go really deep down one path, whether it's mind, body, or soul, there is this understanding of the wholeness that we are as human beings. And, I've heard it. I just heard it yesterday. I was watching this clip, and they were talking about ecstatic dancing and how it's so good for you in your, like, when you're in your meat suit. It's really good to express yourself and enjoy that. And that kind of, that term meat suit, it like really rubbed me the wrong way. And I was thinking about it, like, why does that bother me? And I realized because I feel like there needs to be this healthy respect for all of the facets of us as humans. Our bodies might be like a three-dimensional version of of our spiritual selves, or however we're manifesting in this three dimensions, but it is also incredibly sacred and it deserves so much respect. And I think it's important when we delve into spiritual pursuits to not take for granted the physical needs of our body. And I happen to be in a position where I see what happens 20, 30, 40 years down the line when you don't do that. I have clients that come in and they're very spiritual, but they've let their focus on spirituality
Mm.
be almost an excuse to not taking care of them physically. And I've seen people that are very physically active and they're coming in 30 or 40 years down the line and they're just so emotionally immature. And really kind of, I've been lucky enough to have a lot of clients from a wide spectrum of um, different lives. Uh, and that's kind of what I've seen playing out again and again. The importance of when you look at someone and you want what they have, it's really because they're working in all of those different facets. And I said this to you before, like we need to respect the door that people come in for healing, because someone might um, think that losing weight is how they're going to improve themselves. And that might be how it needs to start. And we have to respect that and show up for them in that facet. Because the end goal, if they lose the weight, they're not gonna stop there. They're going to embody that and they're going to see the other benefits and they're going to then go down that road of like, who am I now? Why did I end up in that position? Like how was I not being of service to myself? How can I improve that? So that's kind of the point that I am at right now in my career, which is really kind of starting to take the spiritual practices that I've adopted and learned from, the physical practices I've adopted and learned from, and really kind of bringing them together and helping people understand just how interconnected all of them are and how important it is. And it's okay to focus on one a little bit more than the other at certain times, but how we kind of, it all moves together. And if we think that we can, just focus on one facet or the other, we're doing ourselves such a disservice because we're not allowing ourselves to really ascend to those next levels. And it is possible. And we have to respect the spiritual side of ourselves and also the physical side of ourselves. They're one and the same, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's amazing. And thank you for sharing your story. I know that you mentioned that you went on a tangent, but I think it was perfect because I want everyone to really understand, where you're coming from and why you are sharing the things that you're sharing, right? You've been through, like any human, you've been through experiences that have ignited so many avenues for you to seek healing. I mean, it sounds like you were ignited on the physical, but then you were also ignited on the emotional, and then that also ignited the spiritual. So all of that is part of your journey, and such as that journey, that package of what you've experienced is basically what you are presenting for people. You're helping others find that key into balance. And as you were talking, that's what I felt. You were talking about, it's okay to go one way or another, but also the thing that kept coming up for me was, yeah, seek that balance in between both. Like it's not just one or the other. And I know for me, that's been a huge part of my own experience, which is I've focused so much on the spiritual, where I can really connect to your experience of taking care of yourself and nourishing yourself, and having to relearn this. And I'm in that journey right now, learning how to nourish myself. Not that I don't know, there's like this concept of what we know, but there's also the feeling because I didn't really receive that, right? growing up. So it's just like learning, it's almost like learning how to reparent yourself in a way, so that you can move forward and expand. And so one thing that I really felt was really interesting about your, you know, I feel your take on this is so holistic. Of course, it's, you know, holistic coach, but it is holistic and it's so beautiful because it really allows us to see ourselves beyond one aspect and see also how one thing is affecting the other, and how they work together. Have you found yourself in your process resistance? Like, did you ever find resistance? Let's say you had like a download of truth, right? That comes to you. Do you ever find yourself in that energy of resistance, and how did you move through that resistance? For example, let's say you wanted to, you know that you have to go to the gym in the morning, but then you don't, you have that resistance of going you know, of having to go to the gym, or maybe you know that you have to go to ceremony, right? But then you have that resistance to go to ceremony even though you know it's good for you. What have you done to get you over that resistance?
So it depends on what it is. What I have noticed with myself is that when it comes to the physical things like eating nutritious meals and making sure I exercise, I kind of lay very heavily on habits, because the physical kind of energy that we need to get through these things, it will be there some days and it won't be there other days. But when I have my habits and I know internally that my habits are based on goals, and I think goals are something that like I'm so passionate about in every facet of our healing journey. And I've very much learned the hard way that if we don't have goals, we are just kind of like flopping around like a fish out of water. Because like right now I have specific fitness goals, and I know that my fitness routine is in line with these goals. So if I'm ever, say, some days my energy, my even spiritual energy is can be in a lot of different places. Sometimes I'm feeling a lot of energy and it's draining me, and some days I feel very like in my physical body and very empowered. So I always kind of reflect back and I'm like, okay, so let's kind of break this down. I have a fitness goal that is telling me to go work out today, but my energetic body is saying I'm busy with other things, processing through something or having a download. What is my big goal? What's my big goal? Like, what have I realized is more important for me? My number one goal is for myself and my family to be emotionally healthy. So then I take that and I look at the situation. So if I push myself for this workout, will I still be an emotionally healthy mother? And will I be able to support my children the rest of the day? And when they come home and they want a mommy, will I be able to be there for my husband? Um, or will it be too draining for me? And I need to really just say, today, I need to understand that my bigger goals are more important than, say, my physical or habits. So that's kind of how I deal with more of the physical things. When it comes to the spiritual things, I kind of learned at some point that like when I have a certain feeling of like fear in the pit of my stomach, and like I'm gonna be raw here, when I feel like I have to go poop because I just got like freaked out about something,
Yeah.
that's usually that spiritual side of me that doesn't want to go through the hard parts of healing, and I know that I need to push through that fear. So I've kind of learned for me, and they'll manifest in very different ways. There, you know, so I just kind of try to listen to myself. Like I take that extra second or minute and just start doing what I call it in personal training a body scan, and it's a concept that I use a lot, especially with corrective exercise. So, and this can also come from poor nutrition, as a lot of as well as spiritual or emotional trauma can both manifest themselves physically with a person that has a very hard time with proprioception, like so figuring out where their body is kind of in space. So if I say like I need you to take a step wider, and they kind of like look around and they're not really even sure how to do that, or I need you to open your chest for this movement, you see a lot of physical trauma, emotional trauma showing up in the body as this disconnect.
Mm.
And so I use this concept of body scanning to help people drop into the physical form to help them really connect with themselves. And it works physically, but it also works spiritually and emotionally, of just taking that pause, dropping into whatever it is that you're feeling and sitting with it. Because
Mm.
that very kind of spiritual side of energy, letting energy flow through you, not kind of holding on to it, because that that emotional side of us getting stuck with energy that then will manifest itself physically. It's all connected. Like I can come into a gym at this point and I can see someone squat, and based on how they're squatting I can be like, okay, like there's some trauma there, whether it's sexual trauma, whether it's emotional abuse, whether it's fear of change. I can see these things physically in a person's body, and I think once I started realizing that is when I really saw how that spiritual and emotional connection goes straight into the physical form. Um, so to go back to answer your question, it really kind of depends on what I'm working with. I've learned for me what works best, and I get it wrong all the time, like so often. But sometimes I'll be like on my way to the gym being like, Tatiana, like probably shouldn't go today because like you already know that like you're feeling really run down and you want to be able to do this. And then I'm like, I know that, but maybe I'll just do like this because this. But like really, you promised yourself that you're gonna do, and it's still in my head, this conversation with myself about showing up for myself in the best way possible, showing up for my family in the best way possible. It is always this learning experience. Um, but really dropping into that. That's the bottom line. Dropping into those conversations with yourself. And sometimes I do get it wrong. And sometimes I'll say, well, you got that one wrong. So hopefully for next time I'll learn from that. And that's kind of how everything is gone, like learning and that wasn't like the right way, or trying it this way. Okay, that worked better. I think society has kind of taught us that we can't trust ourselves anymore.
Mm.
And we
That is
really
so true.
can. And we really need to embrace that. Like you're the only one that knows how to human like you human. I can guide, I can show you some different options, but it has to be what resonates with you. And once you kind of are able to connect with your intuition better, able to connect with your body, that's when the real magic starts to happen. That's when real change starts happening, and you get to kind of like look back one day and be like, I can't believe how far I've come. Like, wait a second, like I'm getting this. I'm like manifesting, I'm healing, I feel good. And people are even coming to me for advice. Like, I don't know how that happened, but I do know that every day I keep showing up for this goal of healing and evolving.
That is so beautiful. And you know what, Tatiana, what you're saying about just following your intuition, that resonates so much with me because that's one of the things that I really try to encourage my viewers here is to really connect to the intuition that they carry, that we all carry, right? Like it's okay to have someone tell you what to do. Sometimes maybe if you feel a little, flustered, maybe you need a little bit of guidance every once in a while, but connecting to that inner GPS to really drop into your body and say, okay, I'm feeling resistance. Where is this coming from? And is this resist again? Seeing that bigger goal is so powerful because that gives you a north, right? It gives you a north of where to, what direction to take, and then at that point, then and then also don't beat yourself up if you made a mistake, or, and I don't want to really say a mistake, but maybe you didn't follow through the way that you wanted to follow through. It's okay, you just just get it. You can try again tomorrow, right?
Yeah, really.
And so I kind of wanted to also weave in a little bit of the conversation that you're starting right now in regards to how, because I mentioned this at the beginning of the video when I was introducing you, how we have been bombarded with this idea that we have to be restrictive and push ourselves, and also operate from a place of almost, it feels like almost very uh it doesn't feel very loving. It just feels almost like you're punishing, very punishing in a way. And I kind of wanted to open this conversation with you precisely because of how you are so connected to the essence of the spiritual aspect of things, and how you understand that love is part of, we want to infuse everything with love, right? So, can you tell us a little bit about what you see in the diet industry, and how has this really affected, or maybe even in your line of work, you see a lot of people that come to you. They probably are coming to you because they're desperate, right? They probably have tried everything under the sun, and they're coming to you, and then you can see the aftermath. I'm assuming of all of the uh, issues that it brings into their lives, into their bodies. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Um, so the first thing I want to say is we need to understand what's happening to us, how we're being influenced. So there is a diet culture that is incredibly pervasive in our society. It is an industry, and it is worth billions of dollars. And there are a lot of people that make a lot of money off of this industry, and they employ some really great, like, advertisers that understand human psychology. And this diet culture, diet industry has become so pervasive that it now is starting with small children to
Wow.
um, influence the way that they experience society, culture, their lives, so that they can then be a consumer when they grow up. So it's really important to understand that this is something that we have that we're victims of, and to really call out diet culture for what it is. It is a way to make money off of people by making them feel like they are unworthy or unsuccessful. Um, and it's a way to keep, I think, society at large, like, busy focusing on physical, the way the shape of our body versus the way that we can show up for each other and build community. And that's the first thing, to really understand how pervasive this culture is in our society, and to also understand that we have a choice to be a part of it or not. Um, the diet industry will convince us through advertisements, through social media, it's all in there, through walking down the street, that we need to look a certain way in order to be acceptable, or in order to be acceptable to ourselves, which, like, I got to give them credit. They like figured out human psychology pretty well, because most of us don't even realize how mired in this culture we are and how pervasive it is. And it has been for, decades. Um, what ends up happening is that we're spending money because we think the next diet is the one that's going to fix our issues.
Mm.
um, and it's not. The science of nutrition is been the same since they first kind of started studying food. The healthiest diet, and when I say, I will use diet when I talk about like restrictive eating patterns, and I'll also use diet when I'm talking about just what your normal eating habits are. I need to figure out two better words so that they don't get confused. But um, the healthiest way to eat for a human being involves understanding that food is physically and emotionally nourishing. And
Mm.
it's meant to be that way. Food has cultural significance, social significance, health significance, interpersonal significance. It really kind of runs the gamut, and that's okay. It has been like that for a lot longer than we've thought that carbohydrates are bad for us. I promise. Like our bodies are way more intuitive, and Mother Earth is like growing everything we need, and it is this interdependent relationship. And that next restrictive eating pattern, we need to start seeing them as such. They are restrictive eating patterns that are put into a new box with a bow tie on it, and then served to us on a silver platter, like just do this, and all of your issues are going to go away. And they're sold to us as if they're going to fix our lives, which they aren't. What ends up happening is that most people nowadays are overfed but undernourished. And I think it's really important to have that understanding. At the same time, we need to realize that we can give ourselves permission to eat cake, cookies, candy every day if that is what gives us emotional satisfaction. So anything that doesn't give us full satisfaction is restrictive in one way or another. And
Mm.
those eating patterns lead to mental health issues, physical health issues, and just like not enjoying life. So if you're looking at the science of nutrition, human beings need a lot more. We have micronutrients and macronutrients that we're getting in our food. So the micronutrients are the vitamins and minerals that our bodies need to carry on all of the normal functioning, like new cell development, muscle growth, our brain firing, all of those really important bodily functions. The macronutrients are kind of the building blocks in how what how our body is going to break them down to be used as a fuel source.
Mm.
And every single one is really important. Like fat in your diet is really important. There are fat soluble vitamins that if you're not eating enough fat, you're not going to be absorbing enough of those vitamins for brain health, for example. Carbohydrates are really important because they give our body energy to function. Like when I'm moving my arm, that's carbohydrates in my muscle that are allowing it to be used correctly. Protein, the building blocks for muscles, all of these things are really important. And I'm not a nutritionist, and I'm not going to say I'm a nutritionist. So understand I'm a nutrition coach, and I work with people more on understanding how diet culture affects them. And unfortunately, a lot of people need to be given permission to eat enough food. So,
Mm.
so what I end up seeing a lot in my work is, and this is across the board in a lot of different populations, but the population that I tend to work with more is going to be women between the ages of 30 and 60 that have been struggling with their weight their whole life and can't figure out why they're still struggling the way that they are because they eat so healthy. What they're not realizing is that they're underfueling their body. Um, Diet culture will tell us that we need to eat in a restrictive pattern and we need to eat in a very severe caloric deficit in order to lose weight. But what we're not, the information we're not putting out there is that when we underfuel our body, there are a lot of mechanisms in our metabolism that make it very hard, if not impossible, to actually lose weight. Because our
Mm.
bodies are very intuitive. If we're not fueling it enough, we're sending our bodies the message that we don't have food security, and so
Mm.
our metabolisms are going to slow down, our brain functioning is going to be affected. This is one of the things that we actually see first, which is brain function being effective. So I'll have someone come into the studio and they, like I explained before, are having a really hard time doing exercises properly. Even with me cueing them, they just like can't figure out how to move their body right. A lot of times that is nutritional deficiencies coming from not eating enough. So when we really start working with someone and we go into like, first of all, well, let's figure out what you are eating. In general, they're underfueling themselves because the diet culture has taught us that restriction is synonymous with success.
Mm.
Success in all different facets. It will lead us to believe that our family life will be better, our financial life will be better, our interpersonal relationships will be better if we physically are smaller. And the way to do that is to restrict. And it's really not true. What we really need to be doing is finding eating patterns that emotionally and physically nourish us, that are easily accessible for whatever our financial situation is or whatever, like wherever we live, and that is sustainable. So
Mm.
those three things are all really important aspects. If it's not sustainable, what ends up happening is we go into what we call a yo-yo diet cycle. So someone will be very restrictive. They will lose a certain amount of weight because they are in an energy deficit, but they can't keep it up because they're not sleeping well. They're being an asshole to their entire family. They're in a bad mood all the time. Their hair is falling out. Their skin is not looking well, and they just can't keep up the missing out on family meals, the saying no to this, and being afraid to, you know, do things in public because there might be
Mm.
food involved and then they're going to feel bad, and we end up in this cycle of losing weight and then gaining it back because we haven't really learned habits of proper nutrition until the next diet comes. We lose that weight and then it just gets to be too much and we go back, and you'll see people that their cycle can be, you know, morning till evening, like a 24-hour restrict binge cycle, or a week long restrict through the whole week and then binge on the weekend, or even going into longer periods of like heavy restriction and then binging, because our bodies can only handle restriction for so long. Your willpower will only show up for so long. And like I said earlier, when we're looking at the physical body, it's really the habits that we put into practice that are going to be there on the hard days. It's not the willpower, because if you're not eating enough, your brain is not working properly. And
Mm.
one of the first things that goes when you're not fueling your brain properly is your willpower. So if you're waking up and not eating breakfast and having a light lunch and like not eating a snack and having a light dinner, like maybe you'll be so exhausted that you're going to fall asleep on the couch, but there's a much better chance that you're going to be fixating on what you didn't eat the whole day and what you do wish you were eating, that you're going to end up in the kitchen in the evening eating everything.
Mm.
That does is then it starts affecting our blood sugar, which then we can get into like really affecting more of our long-term health, as well as how our bodies are just metabolizing calories in general. So the bottom line is diet culture puts us in a position where we are so hyper focused on going against what our bodies intuitively know are right. And it's become so pervasive that stepping into those healthy eating patterns is a very, it's not always, but it can be a very difficult and long process. And I've gone through that myself, and I'm still very much in that process and still dealing with all of the emotional baggage that comes
Mm.
from being a
Yeah.
teenager in the 90s. And I go back and I look at movies that I used to love, and I'm like, I can't believe that this was, you know, what I was, watching all the time. And these were the characters that I looked up to. And no wonder I was miserable, and no wonder I didn't know how to eat properly. Um, but it just goes back to understanding that feeling that we get when it's like the next new thing is what's going to work for me, that is us being influenced by a
Mm.
culture that is just interested in taking our money. And it's not, and it never will be the same as working with a registered dietitian or a licensed nutritionist that understands the mechanisms of bodily function, how chronic disease affects how we metabolize food, how, emotional health is so intertwined with it. And, really getting that proper support, because it is in a sense an eating disorder, this sort of reliance on the next new thing that's going to come up. And I
Mm.
think a lot of it is also misinformation. There aren't enough people out there talking about how dangerous these diets really are, how dangerous it is to be under eating so much for a period of time. And I'll work with people that are looking to lose weight, and we do it in a very sort of careful way, and we go into a calorie deficit that is appropriate for the person for an appropriate length of time, and then bring them out of it so that we don't cause metabolic issues. And
Mm.
there is a science to like specific weight loss, because for some people, and like I said, we have to respect where people come in to get their healing. Sometimes people really are focused and they want to lose that weight. Sometimes they come in and they just want to put on muscle. You see that a lot with people that are a little bit older, and they're starting to feel the loss of muscle mass that you start getting in your 50s and 60s. And they're afraid of falling. They're afraid of not being able to pick up their grandchildren or whatever it is. All of these things are going to be helped by nutrition.
Mm.
Uh, and we just can't get away from it. This is how our bodies work. If we want to even be able to pursue our spiritual goals and support our mental health, our nutrition needs to be on point. Because if it's not, we are doing a disservice to ourselves in thinking that we have willpower over the physical mechanisms that are happening in our body.
What do
And,
you
and
think? What do you think would be a really good thing to get started with? Like someone that is watching this and is getting inspired by what you're saying, and they're they were about to click on that new thing that's restrictive, and they're like, okay, I'm definitely being shifted over. What would you recommend for someone who wants to get started in their journey, and they don't want to go the route of restriction, but they want to go the route of holistic, like a holistic approach? What will be the easiest and most basic thing that you would recommend for them to do at home?
I think, well, first of all, is know that there is a better way, and then start educating yourself. Either I'm a big proponent of working with professionals because we only have a certain amount of time to, um, you know, educate ourselves, and no one can know everything. The professional is someone that has focused their education on what you're looking to
Mm,
achieve and can take all of that education and then just tell you the important points that relate to you and what your situation is. And a proper professional is going to sit down and talk with you about your history, um, understand the emotional side, and set some proper goals for you. If that's not something you're ready to do, a lot of it is like consuming the correct type of content. There are a lot of content creators on YouTube that talk about, understanding what diet culture really is, and more intuitive eating. But I think it's really important to kind of at least check in with a professional, because there are going to be people out there with uh, eating disorders as well as with
mm,
disordered habits
yeah.
that will kind of take the information that they can find and not use it appropriately to themselves because their mind just isn't working correctly. Um,
Mm,
and
mm,
I
that's
think when
horrible.
it comes to nutrition, because it's such a foundational aspect of our physical, emotional, and spiritual health, it's really helpful to seek out someone that knows what they're talking about. And I'm not talking about like the person that's posting on um, Instagram about like their cool workouts or how they're a mom of six and just got flat abs. That is still diet culture. So it's really
Mm,
important to see it as that and to start consuming some new material that's focused on intuitive eating, and also understand, like, be realistic about the amount of time it's going to take. This is a lifelong process. It's not something that is going to result in weight loss in the first month, or maybe even 3 or 6 months, if that's your specific goal, is to lose weight. It's a process. It's something that is sustainable, and it also takes time and patience. So really kind of checking in with yourself. What are your short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? Um, but there is a lot of really good content out there. You just have to be a little picky. Look at someone that you think has a healthy relationship with food. Like, we all know those people, the people that, like, you're sitting at dinner with them and like they're hungry, but then they eat and then they're full and then they stop eating. And we kind of look at them and we're like, oh, like she still has those French fries on that plate and she didn't eat them because she doesn't want to, because she doesn't feel she needs to. Start paying attention to those people in your life. Start gravitating towards the people that understand the importance of food and have appreciation for it. Start seeing food as something that nourishes your body, that you don't have to be afraid of, that doesn't have to result in guilt.
mm,
Listen to me. I give you permission to not feel guilty about any food that you eat for the rest of your life. Like, if you need it from someone else, I just gave you that permission. Um, and sometimes we need that. And that's why I
mm,
think for nutrition especially, it is important to kind of check in with a professional, but know that there's a better way. Know that we can start by adding in instead of taking away. That's where we
I
start.
love that.
We start by adding instead of taking away. And anything that's going to tell you differently, they have an agenda that is not in line with your highest good. And just, unless you have like an actual allergy, um, that like a doctor has told you you have, you do not need to avoid or restrict any food. There is a time and a place for absolutely everything. And the more flexible we can be about our eating, the more intuitive our body becomes. The more our body responds positively to the amount of food that feels good for us. And then we don't have to end up in this cycle of denying our hunger cues and because if we do that enough, our hormones will start getting messed up. So really understanding that food is this beautiful gift from nature,
Mm.
from the universe, and it should be looked at as such. Like the physical pleasure of eating is not something that we have to be scared of or embarrassed about. Like food tastes good.
Yeah.
I love chocolate. I just made peanut butter balls with my daughter yesterday. There is not a single ingredient in there that you would maybe, there's peanut butter. So like there's some fruits, but there's a lot of other stuff that isn't what you would call healthy. I eat every single one of those with so much pleasure because food is meant to be pleasurable. Our bodies were designed this way, you know,
Mm.
anyone that tells you differently is looking to get something out of you. They're looking to push you down for their own benefit. And we need to just start talking about that and start kind of letting people know that there is a better way.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I just love this conversation so much, and I know we could potentially have so many more conversations, and I hope that you might want to come back again and share some more with us. But as we end this conversation, I just kind of wanted to ask you what if you could um let's say set a rule for people, and this is hypothetically, right? Like we're just hypothetically speaking, you're the one person that's going to set a rule for the entire world in regards to following a holistic approach into their daily lives. What would be your rule? What would be that rule, that Tatiana rule?
Um, Always be flexible.
Mm,
Always be flexible. It's not always going to look like the way you think it should, and so much more can be learned from the way it ended up than the way we thought it should end up.
that's so beautiful. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing your wisdom, your knowledge. And for those of you who want to connect with Tatiana, I'm going to leave all of her information on the description below. Yes, she has an Instagram, so you'll be able to follow her as well. She has some really beautiful posts that are inspirational and also knowledgeable, but also connecting you to that beautiful spiritual, emotional side of your healing journey with your body. So thank you so much, Tatiana, again for being here. And I invite you to make sure that you like this video if you enjoyed it. If you feel this video can help someone that you love, please do share this video with someone. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please make sure that you subscribe. I have uh, conversations with healers every single month. I bring people just like Tatiana that are basically professionals on what they do, or even have been through very specific things in their lives that are make them professionals in those specific aspects. So please do come back and listen or watch these videos. I have plenty of more videos, which I will be placing somewhere over here that you can watch if you're inspired to watch any other videos from the Conversation with Healers series that I have going on. So thank you again, and I love you all. Namaste.
Thank you.